Okay, hey everyone, we are back with another edition of 5 Minute Football. This is Mike Waxman from College Football Focus, and today we are joined by Alex Scheer of the MSC podcast, one of the better podcasts you're going to find that encompasses Mid-American Conference sports. The MAC has some great teams in all sports, and so this is one that definitely deserves a listen. I met Alex at a game last year and found him to be a very knowledgeable and just a fun guy. So I said, why not someone who knows the MAC? Let's have him talk about the MAC. Alex, how you doing?
Mike, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for the chance to be on here to talk sports with you, to talk MAC-tion with you. Looking forward to it and appreciate the opportunity.
Well, you are very welcome. Let's get right into it. So this year there is an expanded playoff, and one of the teams, the G5, is going to get an auto bid. And one of the teams that is fighting for it are the Miami Redhawks. They had a really good season last year. They did lose a couple of key pieces, especially on offense, but they seem to have the pieces in place to make a real run. You've got Boise out there, you've got Memphis, you've got Liberty. But from what you know, does Miami have the stuff, do you think, that can maybe grab the G5 auto bid?
Well, I think anytime Miami has Brett Gabbert under center, their team is automatically going to be better. Looking at their schedule, they get Northwestern, Cincinnati, and Notre Dame. I think they probably win two of those. If I'm just being slightly biased, but a little honest, I think Northwestern, they're going through that transition with a new stadium. They're going to be playing lake football, basically.
Right.
I think there's a lot of weather factors when you're playing that close to a lake. I was talking to an Akron guy. They played a soccer game there where balls were flying out of the stadium because of the wind, things like that. And so I think there's going to be things that affect that game that Miami and Northwestern are going to be a little bit neutralized. But I think Miami is returning the best defense in the MAC. Probably Toledo at number two, but I really think Miami goes 11-1, wins the MAC championships to get to 12-1. There's a really good shot they could get this G5 bid in this expanded playoff. And I think that's a win not only for the MAC, but for the G5 as well. Before we had Cincinnati make the playoffs,
Mhm.
after working off of the resume from the year before, that's now out the window. You get the opportunity to, how did your team do this year? And now you can go to the playoffs. And I think that's a huge win across the board. I would love to see all 12 champions in. That's a different conversation for a
Right.
different time. But I think that's a huge win for all of G5. And I'm excited for, even if it's not Miami, I'm excited for teams to have an opportunity to compete for that spot.
Well, and if it was Miami, that defense, I think anyway, could make any Power Five, Power Four team have to work to win the game. I don't know at that level. Obviously, depth becomes a concern, but their defense has difference makers at every level, and I think they would make a power team work. So it'd be something to definitely see, and I'm definitely a big fan of the Red Hawks this season. Um, Moving on, we have got no divisions now in the MAC. Is that something personally? When realignment was coming around and conferences were getting bigger, part of me said, okay, this is a good thing. You're going to have the two best teams play, where a lot of the times there was competitive imbalance. Nowhere was that more evident than the Big Ten, when you would have the Ohio States or the Michigans playing against the Northwestern or an Iowa, and they got ugly. Um, and then the MAC always had a different winner in one of the divisions. Every year it seemed like it was somebody different, but it wasn't always. You might have like a 10-1 team playing like a 7-4 team. So at least with this way, you're going to get the two best teams. But on the flip side, imbalanced schedules are going to be a real big problem, because if you've got, less so in the MAC because it's a smaller league, but um, you're still going to sort of be beholden to schedule luck. So is no division something you like or dislike?
So I've gone back and forth on it, if I'm being real honest. For me, it's this idea that you're getting your best two teams. And I think that's a huge win. I think that helps with things like final rankings. I think that really solidifies, like, oh, well, Toledo didn't get the best whoever, or Miami didn't get the best whoever. I think last year we saw the best two teams in the Mid-American Conference play in the conference championship. We were just lucky that they were in different divisions. The year prior, Toledo won the MAC championship over Ohio University 17-7. And I think something that people didn't notice right away, but I was looking at it. If we had been in this pod format, it likely would have been Ohio and Bowling Green in the MAC championship because Bowling Green would have owned the tiebreaker with Toledo, who also went 5-3. So I think that is a healthy thing to have your conference championship be your best two teams. Again, rankings, just all of that. But I think to your other point, you do get an imbalance of scheduling of Ball State. They don't get Toledo this year. That's huge. You get these pods, which I love the pod setup. So Ball State's going to play Miami and Ohio this year. Northern Illinois is going to play Toledo and Bowling Green. So I love the pod setup, but I think the logic there is that you're going to get this rotation of now you're not going to have this scheduling imbalance. You talk about that. Toledo and Miami didn't play up until last year where they played twice. They hadn't played since 2011.
Right.
That it was one of the longest, if not the longest, in conference drought in the entire country. And that can't happen. And I think the MAC recognized that. Again, there were teams coming in and out. You lost UMass, you lost, just other things happened, Temple. And so I think now you're going to see this rotation of teams. You're guaranteed 2 games. And I think that was the other part of it. You're protecting a lot of rivalries.
Yes.
With this pod thing. Toledo Bowling Green, big rivalry. Toledo Northern Illinois has become a rivalry, or at least was during the 2010s. And now Ball State, they have a big rivalry with Miami. I think that's important too. So I think you're protecting some of those rivalries, and I think that's going to be important. But I think getting this opportunity to kind of rotate teams in and out with consistency is going to be better for the league.
I'm kind of on both sides, kind of like you are. I think there's some good and some bad, but we have to see how it plays out before we can really give any kind of judgment. So moving on, a lot of people talking about Miami, talking about Toledo. Some are talking about Bowling Green, a smattering talking about Northern Illinois. Who might be a surprise team? Maybe a team that's laying in the weeds, or a team that worked the portal real well, or that has a lot of returning production that maybe people aren't talking about, that you wouldn't be completely surprised that if they didn't make the title game, they were at least there until maybe the last week or two.
So I'll be honest with you, and I know I'm wearing their shirt right now. This was not really planned, but I think Bowling Green, they've got a lot of great pieces coming back offensively, defensively. I'm going to pull up my notes here, but this is a Bowling Green team. You've got Harold Fannin Jr., an absolute monster at tight end. I think he and Anthony Torres for Toledo are going to be the best 2 tight ends in the league this year. You've got Terrion Stewart. They were massive offensive weapons for Scott Leffler and that Bowling Green team. They're returning 6 starters on the defensive side. Always good when you can return starters who really, these guys forced 3 turnovers against Michigan. This was a really good defense that I think you talked about depth with Miami. That was their issue, just a lot of depth issues. Now you've got another year of experience. You've got guys behind them who have a little bit more experience. And I think that's going to be key. So for me, it's Bowling Green's one of the standouts to watch. The other one, I think, Western Michigan. And you and I briefly talked about this, but they have really, really tough road games. They've got a game at Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Marshall. But they don't play Miami. They don't play Toledo in conference play. Talking about that imbalance of schedules, that's big. You've got 2 conference favorites that you get to avoid until possibly that first weekend in December. And I think you cannot overstate that. They've got 4 starters returning on the offensive side. The offensive line is going to be huge. Hayden Wolf, Jalen Buckley, you mentioned it. Ride Jalen Buckley. I think that's what you got to do. You did that with Sean Tyler a few years back. You ride Jalen Buckley. He is going to carry this offense. Hayden Wolf, I think, is going to be great at quarterback for the Broncos. And then the defense. You're also getting a guy named Popeye Williams, which I think is a great name.
Yes.
For Western Michigan. And I think he comes in from Louisville, if I remember correctly. And then Scott Power is going to lead that defense. This is a team that I think people are going to sleep on, but I think it's the defense that's going to be a real strength out in the Mid-American Conference for Western Michigan. And I would not be surprised to see them in contention up until the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, the reason I like Western is because they have 2 guys up front on the offensive line who are probably top 20 players in the country in Addison West and Jacob Gideon. You don't normally find two guys on a MAC team that are thought of that well. So even if a couple of other guys are trying to break in their roles, you've got two leaders, you've got two guys who are almost shoo-ins to be all MAC and might vie for some All America honors. So I always say that stuff begins up front on both sides of the ball. And so if that's not a problem for you heading into the season, you've got a shot. So that's another reason to like Western. I guess the last thing, last season, the nation finally learned about Quinyon Mitchell. Some of us knew about him already, and he parlayed a great season and a great Senior Bowl into a first round draft pick from Toledo. Does the MAC maybe have another player like that that's kind of like a guy who maybe nationally doesn't have a whole lot of publicity right now, but as people see him and as the games go on, he might become more of a household name?
So I think, yeah, and I'm going to focus more on defense because I think in recent years the MAC has kind of been looked at as the conference that's all offense, no defense. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we've seen high scoring affairs that have hit the 60s, 70s with regularity in the Mid American Conference. So I'm going to focus on defense a little bit, but I think Matt Salopek out of Miami.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know guys like you who do their research know that name. I know a lot of guys in the MAC who know that name. And a lot of guys who follow the Group of Five know that name. He is a guy I think people need to watch out for. He plays with an incredibly high motor. He is aggressive. He is not going to shy away from making things happen. He's a fantastic player, even better human being. I've gotten a chance to kind of interact with him a little bit. Just phenomenal person. Matt Salopek is a name people need to know. And then I'll just name it out of my alma mater, Toledo. Maxon Hook. You know, he
Mm-hmm.
was in that backfield with Quinyon Mitchell, and they
Yep.
were close. They were good friends. Watch out. Darius Alexander on the Toledo defense as well is another big name, but Maxon Hook, I think, could also be an NFL prospect. If he has a good season this year, watch for his name to be called during the NFL draft next spring.
And he could follow that same path. He's already on the Senior Bowl watch list, so
Yep.
that's something that if he can parlay that into an actual invite, then I agree with you 100%. So, um, all right, well that's pretty much all the subjects we're going to cover. Thanks for joining us. If people want to follow you on social media, where can they find you? Where can they find the podcast? All that info.
Yeah, Mike, thank you again so much for the opportunity to be here. It's always great talking to people who are knowledgeable, who understand the league and understand how special this league is. So I appreciate you and all the work you do with College Football Focus. It does not go unnoticed, and I hope people continue to give you the support that you rightfully earned. But in terms of my own show, it's pretty simple. You guys can follow me at the MSC Podcast on Instagram, Twitter X, TikTok, at MSC Podcast on YouTube. I occasionally do live shows. Most of my video content is there, things like that. But then also you can find me if you follow along on the Varsity Network. You can find me there on the Varsity Network app, a part of Learfield. So just an opportunity to partner with them, and so thankful for what they've been able to provide me with advertising space, things like that. So if you guys get the opportunity, check that out. You know, it's a free app to download. And I mean, lots of great podcasts. You know, I'm sure you're familiar with the Group of Five guys, you know, just other great shows out there. You know, just this is a great league. I love these people in this league. And any and all are welcome. That's kind of my thing is we welcome fans. If you became a Toledo fan yesterday, or if you've been a Miami fan for 50 years, come one, come all. Let's all enjoy MAC-tion together.
Right. And definitely reach out during games because Alex is definitely focused on stuff during games. He will answer questions, he'll interact. Um, Sometimes I have to get in front of him in the food line, but no. Anyway, but yeah, thanks again. We may check in maybe some point during the season, maybe at the halfway point, see how things are going, maybe revisit this, come up with a few new things. So thanks again for coming on, and best of luck to you. And the season is just around the corner.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.